Hi, it's me, Stevie. Tomorrow's my birthday, and I got so many wonderful gifts, but this one was so exciting I have to share it with you. This is now my favorite coffee mug. I call it the iMug because it's made by Apple. However, it comes with an app. You download an app. It's like $100 mug, and I can control the temperature of my coffee all day long. So I'm real excited about that. That's like my favorite birthday gift. Anyway, thank you.
What happens when a woman with a heart full of compassion is tragically swept into the dark, twisted world of a convicted murderer? This is 62-year-old Stephanie Brinson, a loving grandmother whose desire to help others ultimately led her down a dangerous path of destruction. Stephanie's life, filled with kindness and selflessness, took a dark turn when she became involved with David Brinson, her husband, a man serving a life sentence for the brutal murders of 4 people in 1994. In an unimaginable twist of fate, during a conjugal visit with her incarcerated husband, Stephanie was strangled to death in a prison cell, her life extinguished in the very place where trust and intimacy should have been shared. How could a woman so full of life, so dedicated to others, end up as the victim of such a senseless and horrific act? Before we get into the heartbreaking details of her death, let's take a look at who Stephanie Brinson was and why her kindness may have led to her downfall.
It's time for some afternoon ceviche and beer with my son and my daughter-in-law. It's beautiful out here. It feels so good. The weather's just right. A light, warm breeze. I love it.
Stephanie Brinson, also known as Stevie to those closest to her, was a vibrant and loving woman who dedicated her life to her family, friends, and community. At 62 years old, Stephanie was a mother and grandmother, known for her nurturing spirit. She was always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need, whether through her small business as a hairstylist or her efforts to give back to the community. She spent her days helping others, whether it was taking care of the elderly, participating in charity events, or simply being there for a friend in need. However, Stephanie's presence was one that made others feel safe and loved.
Hey, ladies. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
And look at what we're... There it is.
I'm sorry.
11. Hi, Kyla. And then Mary Kay and Ricky are right over there. I can't find them. Okay, here we are with Miss Kennedy getting ready for graduation. So Miss Kennedy is getting her nails and her hair done at the same time here at Harry Lee. Thank you. Hey, it's me, Stevie, just chilling in my truck for a minute while my client is drying. I'm sharing this because I'm excited about my herbal life, my changes in life. I feel so good. I feel so healthy. And I've lost, a lot of weight, but I feel incredible. And so I just thought I'd share this with you. If you don't know what you'd like to do to take care of yourself, my blood pressure is great. I have absolutely no medications to take. Cholesterol all the way down. I'm just excited about my health. I feel so much more vibrant and alive. I look forward to getting up every day, 4 a.m. Life is good.
It was no surprise that she often described herself as someone who is deeply in love with God, and her faith played a central role in her life. On social media, she would share her spiritual journey, posting prayers and reflections to inspire others. Few months before her death, she celebrated her birthday on social media.
Riding in the caddy. Happy birthday to me.
Despite facing personal hardships, including the loss of loved ones, Stephanie remained a beacon of positivity. She was also someone who believed in second chances. But despite all of her kindness, Stephanie's willingness to forgive and love unconditionally led her to make a connection with someone many would have considered dangerous. In the early 2000s, Stephanie met 54-year-old David Brinson, a man who had been convicted for the brutal murders, execution style, of 4 people during a robbery in 1994. David, who was serving 4 consecutive life sentences at Mule Creek State Prison in California, had no remorse for his past crimes. He was a man marked by violence, and his record was one that sent chills down anyone's spine. Yet, despite his violent past, Stephanie saw something in David, something that others might not have noticed. Perhaps it was her unwavering faith or her belief that everyone could change, but she formed a connection with David while he was still incarcerated. They began corresponding through letters and phone calls, and over time, their relationship grew. They talked about the Word of God, drawing strength from Scripture and reflecting on how faith had guided them through life's challenges. Their conversations often touched on forgiveness, resilience, and the importance of holding on to hope even in the darkest of times. But it wasn't only spiritual matters that filled their discussions. They spoke about family, sharing memories of loved ones and dreams for the future. They reminisced about childhood experiences, laughed over old stories, and even debated everyday topics like work, community, and the struggles of modern life. For them, these talks were more than casual exchanges. They were moments of connection. But Stephanie's family and friends were understandably concerned. How could a woman so loving and compassionate be drawn to a man with such a violent history? But Stephanie was steadfast. She believed in giving people second chances, and she saw potential in David. She believed he could be redeemed. Despite her family's protests and concerns about David's past, Stephanie continued her relationship with him. She even took a major step in their relationship. She married David while he was still in prison, a decision that baffled many of those who knew her. But to Stephanie, David was a person who needed love, just like anyone else. She believed that her love could help him heal, even if others thought it was a lost cause.
To do videos because I don't like the way I look in pictures. But this morning after my run, or during my run, I was talking to God and just saying how much pain I'm always feeling. And why do I have to go through so much? I realized, I'm a pretty happy person. I got a lot of great things going, but I suffer a lot of heartaches. And I feel like maybe somebody else can attest to this. You might be a very giving person, and a lot of times you do a lot of wonderful things. But I've been praying for like 45, 50 days now, the same thing. And God told me that, my heart needs to be even softer. And I was like, oh my God, I've suffered hundreds of thousands of dollars in loss because my heart being soft, people walking over me doing things. What could you possibly be talking about? And I'm like, but there is something I harbor deep in my heart, kind of a little hatred for someone. And I've been praying and asking God, please take this away. Don't let me feel like this. And he said, I'm a God of my word, Stevie. He said, I truly love you, and I know your heart and that you love people. He said, but you have somebody that you hate, and that's my child. And I was like, God, but the wrong that was done. And he said, well, greater wrong has been done to my son. He said, but he still loved you enough to save your soul. And I said, I understand, God, but I'm not him. I'm not Jesus. What do you want me to do? How can I get rid of this? And he said, you need to fall in love with Jesus. And I said, I love the Lord. He said, no, fall in love with Jesus. If you fall in love with Jesus, nothing can really hurt you like that. Nothing. I have doubts if I'm going to post this because I look so bad. But if there's somebody out there and you've done a lot and you love people, you do, search your heart. Ask God to help you heal from whatever that is that's hurting you, because you have to love everybody. You have to truly love. And I think that if we fall in love with Jesus, really fall in love with him, the worst of enemies can't hurt us. I've seen people have testimonies where somebody killed their child
and they prayed for that person's soul. That's where we have to be, you know, that's where we have to be. And I want to be that person.
Their relationship was unconventional, to say the least, but it wasn't until Stephanie visited David at Mule Creek State Prison that the true horror of their relationship would unfold. On November 13, 2024, 62-year-old Stephanie Brinson visited her husband at Mule Creek State Prison in California for a conjugal visit, something she had done before. These conjugal visits were meant to allow families to maintain connections with their incarcerated loved ones in a private setting outside of the typical prison environment. Inmates like David Brinson, who had shown good behavior, were sometimes allowed these visits as a way to promote rehabilitation and family bonding. However, that night, everything went horribly wrong. According to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, at around 2 a.m., David Brinson used a family visit phone to report that Stephanie had passed out during their visit. He claimed that she had collapsed, and emergency life-saving measures were immediately administered. Paramedics arrived on the scene, but despite their efforts to save her, Stephanie Brinson was pronounced dead before 3 a.m. At first, authorities believed her death was due to natural causes, but as the investigation progressed, the truth came to light. Stephanie had been strangled by the same man she had gone to visit in the prison cell. Her life extinguished in the very place where trust and intimacy should have been shared. The shocking revelation sent ripples through her family, who had hoped for a peaceful end to her relationship with David. But Stephanie's death was far from peaceful. It was the result of a violent act carried out by the man she had trusted and loved. Stephanie's family had always been wary of David's violent past, but nothing could have prepared them for the devastating news that Stephanie had been murdered by the man she married. As investigators dug deeper into the circumstances surrounding her death, they uncovered even more unsettling details. After Stephanie's death was ruled a homicide, her family demanded answers. How could such a tragedy happen during a visit meant to encourage family bonding and rehabilitation? The questions were endless, and the pain of losing Stephanie was compounded by the suspicion that the prison system had failed to protect her.
A convicted mass murderer already serving life behind bars is now accused of again, this time his own wife during a conjugal visit. David Brinson, sentenced for the brutal murders of 4 people, was the last person to see his wife alive. At first, authorities believed she died of natural causes, but the autopsy tells a different story. The truth? She was strangled. Now her family is demanding answers. Like, how could this happen inside of a prison? And was there a deadly plan all along? This woman, Stephanie Brinson, known as Stephanie Dowells, was found inside a California prison in November of 2024. She is now at the center of a homicide investigation because authorities say she was strangled. Her husband, a convicted mass murderer, already serving life behind bars. David Brinson is serving 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole for the execution-style murders of 4 men during a 1990 robbery in Los Angeles. He was convicted in 1994 and just narrowly missed the death penalty. Now, according to the LA Times, here's what happened. Brinson reportedly believed one of his victims, Robert Marks, was a high-level cocaine dealer. He stormed into Marks's home demanding drugs and money. But after ransacking the place and finding almost nothing, Brinson made a decision that would change the rest of his life and end someone else's. Prosecutors say he forced Marks and 3 other men to lie face down on the floor and then shot each of them in the back of the head, execution style. His victims included 59-year-old Robert Marks, his roommate, 28-year-old Gene McCullers, and 2 visitors, Celadino Ligtas, who was 33, and William Terry, who was 27 years old. Despite his violent past, Brinson was still allowed visitors. According to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation website, some inmates are eligible for family visits, which is defined as visits that occur in private apartment-like facilities on prison grounds and last approximately 30 to 40 hours. On November 13, 2024, Brinson and his wife were in the middle of a conjugal visit. Just after 2 a.m., prison officials say Brinson used the family unit phone to call for help, claiming his wife had passed out. Officers attempted to resuscitate her, but it was too late. Stephanie Dowells was pronounced at 2:51 a.m. At first, her death was believed to be from natural causes. Now, 4 months later, the Amador County coroner confirmed Stephanie was strangled. What's unclear is how long she had been at the prison and when exactly she arrived. Stephanie, known as Stevie, was 62 years old. Her family told KCRA she was a hairstylist and a small business owner. Her mother, Ovetta Wilson, called her, quote, the glue that held the family together. She was a mother of 2 and a grandmother of 6. Her family, devastated by her death, is now demanding answers from the prison. Like, how did this happen? And how are people with multiple convictions allowed to have conjugal visits? According to the CDCR, while certain inmates, like those on row or convicted of sex offenses, are banned from these types of visits, multiple convictions are not listed as a restriction. Regarding security for family visits, an officer tasked with monitoring a visit can check in unannounced, but every effort shall be made to ensure the privacy of the inmate and their visitors, according to the CDCR manual. As of now, no charges have been filed, and officials say the case remains under investigation. The Amador County Sheriff's Office confirmed to the Los Angeles Times that Brinson is officially suspected of killing his wife. If convicted, this would be Brinson's 5th charge.
Stephanie's son, Armand Torres, was particularly vocal in his grief and frustration. He couldn't understand how someone like David, a man with a history of execution-style murders, was ever allowed to have such privileges. The CDCR's policies regarding conjugal visits were scrutinized, and many began to question how an inmate convicted of multiple murders could be granted unsupervised access to his family member, let alone his wife. The prison system explained that conjugal visits were only allowed for inmates who met certain criteria, including good behavior. But Stephanie's family couldn't comprehend how David, with his violent history, was ever deemed safe enough for such visits. As the investigation continued, the family found themselves demanding accountability, not just for the death of Stephanie, but for the failures that allowed her to be in such a dangerous situation. The investigation quickly turned its focus on the prison's role in the events leading up to Stephanie's death. Authorities began to look into their policies surrounding conjugal visits and whether they were adequately enforced at Mule Creek State Prison. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation stated that conjugal visits were allowed for inmates who had displayed good behavior over time, but the Brinson case raised serious concerns about whether those policies were truly being followed. Stephanie's family was devastated, but they were also frustrated. How could a woman who had done so much to help others, including helping David during his time in prison, end up as the victim of violence at the hands of the man she loved? The family believed that the prison system had failed to protect Stephanie and demanded a full investigation into how the visit was allowed to proceed without proper supervision. The fact that Stephanie had been left alone with David, an inmate who had committed such violent crimes in the past, seemed incomprehensible. To them, it was a tragic oversight on the part of the prison system that cost them everything. In the wake of Stephanie's death, both the family and the public began to question the policies that allowed violent offenders to have access to conjugal visits. CDCR officials announced that they would review their procedures for family visits and conjugal privileges. Many believed that stricter regulations needed to be implemented to prevent future tragedies like the one that took Stephanie's life. The prison system's policy allowed inmates like David, who were deemed to be in good behavior, to receive conjugal visits in private, apartment-like rooms within the prison. These visits were meant to help maintain family connections and provide a sense of normalcy for the incarcerated individuals. However, after David's murder of Stephanie, it became apparent that this policy had serious flaws, especially when it came to inmates with violent criminal histories.
I actually would have sworn that I had seen every kind of murder you could imagine. Name a location, a victim, a motive, a suspect, a weapon. I've covered 10 of them. But never a woman on a conjugal visit to a husband. A husband who's serving 4 life sentences for that one is a first, for me, anyway. Still, if any inmate would strangle a loving and trusting and clearly devoted spouse, David Brinson is a pretty likely candidate. Back in 1990, Brinson stormed into a Los Angeles apartment aiming to rob a retired tavern owner who he thought was a drug dealer. But alas, there were no drugs, there were no big wads of cash, just 4 men sitting there watching a basketball game. So David Brinson made a plan. He forced all 4 of those men to the floor and he shot them one by one in the backs of their heads, also known as execution style. David Brinson was convicted of that, and he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. And at some point, while David Brinson was marking off those long days at the Mule Creek State Prison in California, he connected with Stephanie Dowles on the outside. Stephanie was known to her family as Stevie, and she was a successful salon owner, a mother of 2, and a grandmother of 6. Stevie believed that she was helping inmate Brinson find redemption, thereby making him a better man, and soon she married him. Not long after that, the state of California allowed her to be alone with him during something commonly known as the conjugal visit. Nowadays, there are only 4 states that allow conjugal visits. Bet you didn't know that. California is one of them. Inmates with good behavior can earn what are called family visits that take place in apartment-like facilities on the prison grounds. And those visits can last up to 40 hours. That also surprised me. Stevie and David, they were on a conjugal visit last November 13th when David picked up the phone and told the officers that his wife had passed out. The paramedics tried to revive her, but less than an hour later, Stevie was dead. For the next 4 months, her family was led to believe that Stevie died of natural causes. But then the coroner determined something else. Coroner determined that Stevie was strangled, apparently by the man she married and conjugally visited at the prison. While Stevie's last visit on November 13th seemed to be the final chapter for her, we are now learning some new details. David Brinson had apparently engaged in several conjugal visits with Stevie, including one in which her 3-year-old grandson was present. Let that sink in for a hot minute. He's a multiple murderer with a wife and grandson on the premises. We've also learned that Brinson attempted to take his own life back in July and failed, and yet was still allowed his visits with Stevie afterwards. As of yet, no charges, additional, I should say, have been filed against Brinson. DA says he's still waiting for a full report from the prison. But Stevie's family is heartbroken. They want justice, not to mention answers. They want answers. Why are murderers with multiple victims being allowed these family visits? Why did it take 4 months to classify Stevie's death as a homicide? And how many more times will prison officials let this kind of thing happen? I'm joined now by Stevie Dell's daughter, Natalie Jimenez. Natalie, thank you so much for being with me, and I'm so sorry for what you and your family are going through, especially just how complicated it seems and the lack of answers. How did you first find out about this, and where do things stand today?
We found out Wednesday morning, November 13th. We got the phone call that she was found passed out and they weren't able to resuscitate her. About 2 weeks later.
Did they say anything more about it?
No.
Before we go further, did they say anything about being passed out? Did they say she'd hit her head, or that she appeared to have a seizure, or anything else that was informative other than just passed out?
No. When David called, he called me. He said when he woke up to go to the restroom, he found her passed out. When he went to the restroom and came back, he found her passed out. But it's like, how did you not see her passed out before you went to the restroom? You know, I also asked, you know, what time did she go to sleep? He gave me about 2-3 different times. Every time I asked him to repeat the story to me, he probably changed it about 4 to 5 times.
So what happened? Like, why did it take 4 months for them to finally come up with strangulation. I mean, 4 months seems an awfully long time to come up with something other than passed out, something as serious as strangulation, and 4 months seems a long time to let you and your family know that.
It is. It is. 4 months. I honestly think they were trying to sweep it under. You know, it was a little short after, you know, we had help from a forensic person, and when he seen the body, he said there was evidence of abuse, so to do a private autopsy. So I really do think the prison was trying to go around it, and they found out that we were doing a private autopsy, and they just decided to tell us. But 4 months is still a lot. I think they knew sooner, and they could have told us sooner. I honestly feel like they were just trying to find a way to go around it.
What did you know about David Brinson, and were you ever concerned about Stevie going inside the prison walls to spend time alone with him in an enclosed space that's unmonitored?
I mean, you know, speaking to him, you wouldn't think too much of it. You know, it seemed like he was trying to get better. You know, he was in school. He knew I was doing treatments. I was doing chemo treatments and things like that. So he would call me, and he would do like prayers before me going to my treatments. And, you know, he would engage a lot. Well, try to engage a lot. A lot of the family wasn't a big fan of him just because he was in prison. Nobody really knew what he was in prison for.
In response to the mounting public pressure, CDCR promised a full review of their conjugal visit protocols. They also announced they would be re-evaluating the eligibility criteria for inmates, especially those who had committed violent crimes or had long histories of aggression. These reviews, however, did little to calm the public's outrage, as many people believed that such changes should have been made long before Stephanie's death. Meanwhile, the investigation into Stephanie's homicide continued as law enforcement officials worked to gather more evidence and determine the exact circumstances of her murder. While it seemed clear that David Brinson was responsible, the legal system needed to ensure that all facts were thoroughly examined before moving forward with charges. But most importantly, David Brinson's violent history could not be ignored. In 1994, he was convicted of executing 4 men during a robbery in Los Angeles. The crime had been brutal, and David's lack of remorse for the murders had led to his sentence of 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He had shown no signs of rehabilitation and had remained a danger to society throughout his time in prison. David's actions in 1994 were so heinous that he had become one of the most notorious inmates at Mule Creek State Prison. He had been involved in multiple violent incidents during his incarceration, but none of that seemed to deter him from committing further acts of violence. Stephanie, a woman who had known him from their online communication and visits, believed in his potential for change. She wanted to help him turn his life around and believed that through her support he could be rehabilitated. But David's past crimes, along with his behavior while in prison, made it clear that he was never going to change. Despite this, Stephanie, driven by her deep faith, continued her visits, believing that love and support could help him become a better person. Tragically, her unwavering belief in redemption would be her undoing. On August 13, 2025, prosecutors formally charged David Brinson with the murder of his wife, Stephanie Brinson, following the tragic incident that occurred during a conjugal visit at Mule Creek State Prison. The announcement marked a pivotal moment in the case as authorities moved forward with building their prosecution against a man already serving multiple life sentences for prior convictions. David Brinson was scheduled for arraignment in September 2025, where he was expected to hear the charges read in full and enter a plea. As of early 2026, however, he has not yet entered a plea, leaving the legal process in a state of anticipation. The delay has only heightened public interest, with many waiting to see how the justice system will handle a defendant already serving life sentences for past murders. David Brinson remains incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison, where he continues to await trial for Stephanie's murder. The case has drawn significant attention, not only because of the shocking nature of the crime, but also because it raises broader questions about prison visitation policies and the risks posed by unsupervised conjugal visits for violent offenders. Stephanie's death sparked a broader conversation about prison reform, especially concerning the policies that govern conjugal visits. Her family and advocates for victims' rights began to push for stricter regulations, arguing that individuals convicted of violent crimes should not be allowed unsupervised visits. The current policies allowed inmates like David Brinson to be eligible for conjugal visits if they had demonstrated good behavior over a period of time. However, critics of the system pointed out that a violent past, especially one as severe as David's, should automatically disqualify an inmate from such privileges. The Brinson case highlighted a significant flaw in the system, where inmates who had shown no true remorse for their crimes were able to manipulate the system to their advantage. As Stephanie's story became a rallying cry for prison reform, her family also began to focus on how they could honor her memory and continue her legacy. Despite the pain of losing Stephanie, they were determined to ensure that her death was not in vain. Though Stephanie Brinson's life was tragically cut short, her family has worked tirelessly to continue her mission of love and service. Stephanie's legacy lives on through the work of her family and the ongoing efforts to change the system that failed her. While her death was devastating, her family has channeled their grief into action, determined to make a difference in honor of the woman who always put others first. As they continue to fight for justice and change, Stephanie's family remains committed to her vision of helping others and making the world a better place, even in the face of such unspeakable loss. The tragic story of Stephanie Brinson serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows of the prison system. How can we ensure that family members visiting their loved ones behind bars are kept safe from harm? What steps can we take to prevent incidents like this from happening again? My condolences to the family and friends of Stephanie Brinson. I hope she gets justice and no one else gets to face the same situation. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.